and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Okay, so let me get into it real quick because I've got a different style than maybe some of the other folks. I'm going to show some videos and hopefully they're not as loud as they were last time. Okay, so just let me know, Phelim, you can see the screen, I assume, yes?
Yes, it's all good.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. So let's start off with SOC, or rather the ISOC, Interactive SOC, Intelligent SOC, Innovative SOC. When we take a look at the picture right now, we can see how we've evolved in many different ways of capturing information and trying to make sense of all the information. We primarily started off in the middle with proactive predictive monitoring, the classical ITIL responses, event correlation with log files and data, then started to change into integrating changes and risk management information, and also have depended very heavily on logs, direct connections to agents, direct connections to databases, and now finally APIs. After this one specific area, the SOC then concentrated on where we pull our information in. So we start off with the threats information that was coming on the outside via agents and logs, what things were going on in our environment. Then we expanded that to include open source intelligence, and then evolved into integrating threat feeds or threat intelligence feeds. And now we're going into the arena of risk and tactical risk feeds. So after that second piece, we started to focus on the third piece, which was our SIEM dashboards, which pulled in information about penetration tests, audits, and assessments that we did, either on the fly or once a year. Then started to integrate things like vulnerability status of various different IT assets, and then started to report that information back into the organization. And then last but not least, we find ourselves now going into what I call proactive intel, which means we're finding much more real-time and near real-time data and status about the security posture of any given IT asset, about the organization. And we now start to pull in additional information on integrating tactical risk intelligence. While all these things are being done at the same time, or we're continuously working on these things, the biggest concern that I have, and I've discussed with multiple customers, is that we don't fall into this specific picture, which is drinking massive amounts of information or data from a fire hose. Now, a lot of people are out there selling threat feeds and selling information or quote unquote threat intelligence. But a lot of us have found, as we evolved in these different times and the value of information that we're pulling in, that too much information is almost as bad as having no information. And the question is always, how and why are we collecting the information? What use cases are we using? And why are we doing all this stuff? So I like using videos to portray complex things, and I'll start up with this one. Just let me know if you can hear it.
When we think about cybersecurity, we think about computers, smartphones, tablets, and all these different types of electronic gadgets. We also think about how different types of attacks, among other things, cyber attacks, can compromise or destroy these gadgets. But security is much more comprehensive. It also includes many other aspects, including physical security. In the near future, autonomous vehicles will be a part of our daily life. We are all seeing a glimpse of this future now, even as we speak, in the new different types of emerging technology. Things like self-driving cars, planes landing on their own, drones flying autonomously and independently throughout an entire geofenced arena, and a lot more of that innovative type of technology that is constantly coming our way faster than we can ever have imagined in the past. Different companies are working today on autonomous vehicles and ships. Ships, for instance, that can steer and traverse the seas from one point to a final destination with little or even no human interaction. If we think about these autonomous vehicles or ships or planes. The types of attacks that can happen can be extremely hazardous and or detrimental to the company that owns the ships, to the teams that may be on these ships, and also to the customers and the oceans and the world at large. If we think about some of the attack scenarios, malicious agents can find their ways into compromising various different security systems of these autonomous vehicles, and in this case, specifically ships. They can steer them into a collision course with other ships, crash them into other things, causing much more chaos and damage, or even steal these ships without anyone being aware of it until it is too late. If we think ahead of this very simple scenario, we could have safety measures in place to prevent this, using things like encrypted embedded signals in the systems, checksums, and internal systems of checks and balances and processes, as well as the procedures that are needed to alert the security teams that something may or may not be wrong or amiss. Even things like GPS signals, which are not only the basis for navigation of ships, but also for all other types of autonomous vehicles, is at risk. People can tamper with these GPS signals and make it look like if you're in one destination, when in reality, you're just about to drive off a cliff, you're in the wrong airport, or you're in the wrong ocean, or just about to crash somewhere. Think of a world where most shipping companies use autonomous ships, planes, trains, and trucks to deliver packages. We are even seeing drones being used in this case by companies like Amazon and others. When we think about these use cases, we need to take cybersecurity very seriously, and we need to do it right now. We need to improve our cyber defense because those attackers are just waiting for those exploitable vulnerabilities to take over these systems that we will be depending on for our future and for all our supply chains. Hakdefnet, protecting lives and companies.
Okay, now, oops. So when you take a look at these videos are based off of actual use cases that we've deciphered from different types of attacks that have happened. So even though we like working with the videos to explain and convey more complex scenarios that we've seen and also defended against, these things are very real. And they're not just theoretical use cases that you might see in some academic paper. They've actually happened. And just as Eric and some of the others have talked about that the physical security means are very important, we're not only talking about the supply chains, but we're also talking about the people that take care of these different types of technology within a supply chain. Now, in regards to the ships and to autonomous vehicles, a lot of the people that are attacked through phishing attacks, which can be mitigated by awareness and some of the components that Eric was talking about, is much more important than a lot of people think. So I would encourage folks, regardless of this presentation, to take a look at what different types of means of awareness you can use, because that is always part of a more comprehensive defense, in-depth approach, and also just in general, good practice to defend your IT assets and your people against intrusion attempts. Right, so that was number one. Another thing that's going on and that we're seeing is as the pandemic has evolved and these different types of disruptions happen in any given geography or nation or country or democracy, we see that there's a lot of different forces that are out there that are trying to cause disruptions in any and every way possible. Some of the things that we've seen and that we've monitored using social media platform monitoring that we already have built into our products is a very disrupting, not fake news, but fake narratives that are built for propaganda, information warfare and propaganda that is sent out through different means by trolls that target both Democrats and Republicans. And typically are troll accounts that are civil accounts created by nation states to just create unrest and cause disruptions and basically divert people's attention away from what's actually happening. The interesting thing and the frightening thing at the same time is that this information warfare and propaganda that Russia, China, and others are waging against the United States since the last few years is extremely successful because there's basically no risk of the people that are powering these different types of attacks from getting caught. And also it's a fairly cheap means of waging hybrid warfare in what we are now calling episode 2 or the cyber proxy wars. What this means is all these different things in the hybrid warfare chain are slowly being outsourced more and more to cyber crime syndicate groups that makes it almost impossible to find out who the actual nation state is. The only way that you typically find out that a specific attack is nation state sponsored is, curiously enough or funny enough or interestingly enough, some of the same things that apply to social engineering. When you see folks that are sending out a message that is very, very emotional and is supposed to call you to action, or is trying to incorporate a specific type of unrest by hating a specific group or people, or even more dangerously leveraging things like protest, whether it be Black Lives Matter or women's rights, or different types of things that we see, these different types of nation states deploy their services both with boots on the ground as well as information warfare and propaganda to push their messages. And here's another video that highlights some of the things that we found in actual attacks.
When people think of cybersecurity, they think of computers, smartphones, tablets, IoT devices, and other electronic components. And then they think of the cyber attacks that can compromise or destroy the services and/or these gadgets. But security is much more comprehensive. It includes many different aspects, such as physical security. With most people getting their news from websites or social media, the way that people have digested information and gotten the situation of any given moment in time has relied on many new channels of information. With these new channels of information, it has unfortunately now become easier more than ever to spread propaganda, false information, fake news, and other types of disruptive media to the masses. Unfortunately, this can be done to disrupt the political system, a nation, an interest group, or anything else in order to influence dissent, create disruptions for a certain political party or an interest group, or simply to change the dynamic of a country and get them prepared for an invasion. These types of systems and the way that they are used to disseminate propaganda are becoming more and more dangerous. And unfortunately, many new generations that are depending on these new types of social media and different types of electronic information do not understand a lot of the risks involved in what is propaganda and disruptions from different enemy nation states. Unfortunately, this avenue is a relatively cheap and low-risk form of warfare, which is comprised of hybrid warfare that uses non-traditional ways to wage warfare in the electronic age. This is why it is now the #1 tool used against political adversaries and other types of adversaries against an interest group or a nation state. It can be very easy and as basic as creating creative news or fake news stories online on numerous social media platforms and blogs. This piece of information, or these numerous social media platforms and blogs, are used to create a narrative that is not the truth. It can also be more complex, such as sending disruptors to hijack peaceful protests and also turn them into violent riots. Riots that can completely decouple a normal way of life in a given nation state. The examples of these are more than prevalent in the news today and in you, the reader or viewer's mind. We only need to take a look at some of the things about Black Lives Matter and these different types of platforms being misused by various different nation states to coordinate violent activities. The only way that you can detect that either you or your company or your country are targeted is to collect information using the information lifecycle or intelligence lifecycle to understand what it is that you're looking at, how these things are coordinated, and how to compare what fake is in relation to the truth. This is becoming much, much more difficult today than it was in the past. We have to filter out information that is propaganda, or at the very least is not telling us what is really happening, but is shaping a fake narrative and turning it into what people are starting to believe as reality. We have to find credible sources of data, information, and constantly fact check them against everything that we read, see, hear, or view on the internet. Think of a world where you cannot trust any major news source or any type of online media in any way, shape, or form. Think about what that society is like, not trusting what you see, hear, or can view. We are very close to living in that world right now. What can we do about it? We need to take cybersecurity and defense seriously now before it's too late. And we also need to make sure that the entire world knows what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. We need to improve our cyber defenses by thinking critically and by having ways and solutions that help us determine what is the truth and what isn't the truth. Fake news, propaganda, and hybrid warfare only lead down one road, the road to our destruction. This is not acceptable. Hakdefnet, protecting lives and companies.
Okay, so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to collect information from various different sources, and what we're ultimately doing with the things that we talk about today and all these different types of events that we're having from the security perspective is we want to enable people, customers, partners, MSSPs, MSPs, everyone that we're working with to connect the dots. And the reality of connecting the dots is that we're working on a multi-dimensional 3/4D type of model, and that information in this graph is constantly, or in this globe, is constantly changing with the way adversaries are targeting different types of nation states, and also how adversaries target you and your company. So when we talk about intelligence or threat intelligence, the closer we get to collecting data that has no value, it's much worse than if we had no data, because we're investing time, money, and people into things that we can no longer waste our time on. And we need to figure out very quickly what information is relevant by using use cases and getting that information as quickly as possible so that we can start making the right assumptions and then start to correlate our security defenses based on that information. A lot of the stuff that we've been doing for more than 4 years has been concentrating on looking at traditional attacks, assembling information from open source feeds that we created and imported into our own Cyber Insight platform. And we're constantly evolving this to create simpler systems that basically integrate with small boxes and also VMs or API-based feeds that MSSPs and partners can integrate with their solutions. The data that we collect is based on two different things. First off, open source that's been validated. Now, I know unfortunately a lot of companies don't talk about this, but this is the truth. Most of the feeds that are out there that you'll see are based off of open source information that is basically free. The thing that isn't free is turning this information into intelligence in a way, shape, or form that makes sense. And that's what we've been doing for the last 5 years with Hakdefnet, and we also train people on how to recognize these things with our Cyber Intelligence Academy, as well as teach people the tactical aspects in our One Delta tactical companies. So at the end of the day, people keep on asking me, what is the value of all this stuff that we're doing? I'm not doing this to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but I'm ultimately here to make sure that this scenario, which has happened in Ukraine in 2015 and in other countries that Russia has targeted with their APT groups, happens to us. And we're very close to this, so. Okay, so that leads me down to what are the things that we're doing and how can we defend ourselves against these different types of attacks that are happening, that are not unicorns, that don't have silver bullet solutions, and that are not resolved by threat feeds. There's a few different things that we're doing together with our partner network and with some of the people that are working on these presentations that you've heard today. So some of the things that we're working on are the all-included boxes where we have all of the intelligence that we're collecting on open source and on our own, I wouldn't call it closed source, but our teams that actually go into websites that you see down here, like where the credential stuffing lists are, that make it extremely easier for you to download anyone's credentials within about 2 seconds to about a minute, depending on what files you're looking for. These different types of things are sold by threat actors to nation states and to anyone that's interested in DOSing people, finding addresses, and doing stuff like that. And we also pull in that information through automated API defense intelligence, which is part of our virtual sizzle product portfolio. We integrate the feeds from some of the folks that are here as well as our own feeds if needed. And we also have cyber warfare CI defense plugins and also appliances that help pull information in, like for instance, our real-time Twitter stream analyzer, which we use to basically monitor terrorists and different types of organizations. Why Twitter? Because most of the adversaries that we're seeing, they either use Telegram or Twitter to communicate with their teams. And typically they start with Twitter and then move to secure channels or encrypted channels on Telegram to continue their information. Once you identify these users and the streams and how they post things, which requires human interaction, then you can start tracking and infecting these different operators and getting some more information from the intelligence side. When you monitor those transactions for specific keywords or for specific items that we have integrated in our machine learning algorithms and everything that we do, you can pull that information in and it will help identify who's looking at you and what issues you might be running into. When an attack does happen and the worst case scenario happens, which I hope doesn't, we also provide survival training. So what happens when all the lights go off? How can we survive? Our One Delta tactical team is basically focused on training lethal and non-lethal ways of defense. We also train people how to use solar systems, battery packs, living off the land and in wilderness, and also converting things like undrinkable water into drinkable water. So we're not only concentrating on the electronical side of defense, we're also concentrating on the tactical and physical side of defense and intelligence. There's some other folks out here, I believe Chris does this too with his company, and some of the other folks that you've probably heard as well. We have a lot of different free tools that can help you get started without paying a dime on trying to find out what your security posture is. We also have podcasts, and I'm also on Twitter. Be very careful if you follow me on Twitter, because I do a lot of things to basically rile up adversaries and to tickle out those folks that are actually monitoring us that are not Americans but are nation states. So don't take all the tweets that I do, take them all with a grain of salt, right? Unless you know me and we have private chats, then that's a different story. The risk report will allow you to do a simple risk report on dumped credentials and other types of things like command and control server activity that may be happening on your shared resources. The Divinity Scanner is a red team tool that is completely free on GitHub that you can download and use, that also integrates with Shodan and can basically do a lot of different things in addition to what an Nmap scan can and other types of tools. Please use this for defensive modes only. Use this in coordination with your red team to take care of that stuff. And then my email, mike@hakdefnet.com. We are working with different groups to OEM and white label our technologies. And I'm looking forward to working with you as customers and partners. With that, let me open it up to questions.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Mike. We've got a lot of comments actually. Let me go up. Damien says, very cool about the fake news. That section was very interesting to think about, where no press can be trusted. So that's good. Ilio says, totally agree, bad data is far worse than no data. I know there's a lot of honeypot or honey trap type things out there, maybe working the other way around.
Right.
Danita, who's on the next panel, says agree, and we can see why it is important to be knowledgeable in how to detect fake news. Mike Manrod says the misinformation campaigns and the impact they're having on our society, way of life, can make it go horribly wrong. Will probably be the biggest thing losing sleep over. And it goes on, it goes on.
Okay, fantastic. So the short answer is I don't want to scare people. That's not my objective. My objective is just to make sure that everyone has awareness, just like Eric. That's also part of my job. When you're aware of the risks, then you can start to mitigate them. And that's the primary reason why I talk about this. The other secondary reason is by showing these videos that are based off of real actual attacks, we're moving away from, okay, well, here's a company using marketing to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but these things actually happen. So we need to assume realistically that a lot of our critical infrastructure has already been compromised, and we need to verify that the compromised systems are compromised, what they're compromised with, and also to reverse those compromises in these different systems. The other thing is we need to think differently about how we approach security, simply because our adversaries are changing. So when risks and threats are evolving and our adversaries are evolving with their attack methods, we have to evolve with them or we will not be able to be successful. And that's the big message that I want to point out. We're here, we're happy to work with anyone and everyone that wants to work with us, whether you're the FBI or whether you're a commercial company or partner. Our objective is ultimately to save lives, right? So with that, give it back to you.
Thank you very much. And it looks like I should connect Damien and you offline because it says he's interested in white labeling. Now you've got his interest, but
Sure.
We'll do that offline. Please give Mike a wonderful round of applause. Thank you for insightful talks and really thoughtful videos. It's really good to mix up all the presentation styles. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Very appreciate all the feedback and honored to be here as always. So thank you very much.
Lovely. See you soon. Perfect. And please keep those comments coming. Please keep LinkedIn and Twitter buzzing. We're suggesting physical cyber as a hashtag, so please keep that going. We're, of course, delighted to welcome and be supported by all of our wonderful supporters with the logos behind me. Again, if anybody wants a copy of this wonderful commemorative mug, send me your actual address. And then I'll be able to post it too. That's the only reason. I'm not saving your address for any other reason. But now, here we go. A very interesting topic, one close to many people's hearts in this audience. How can innovative technology develop the executive protection professional of tomorrow? I'm just going to welcome our panelists up, and then I'll introduce them because we've got some really world-class experts in the field. So let me just make sure that I've got everybody. And Lee, where's Lee? Lee, fantastic. And yes, hi Brian, how are you doing? Can't quite hear you yet, but I think you're mute.
I'm well, Phelim. How are you?
Yes, doing well. And just making sure we've got Danita. So fantastic. On our panel today, we have Brian Jensen, Executive Vice President and author at AS Solution. We have Chuck Tobin, President and CEO at Risk International. Lee Orton, Managing Partner and COO of Fortress Risk Management. Damien Scott, CEO Bedrock Special Projects Group. And we've also got Danita Grow, a CEO at Athena Worldwide.